Tom Roush. I reside in the Greater Naperville chapter in Glen Ellen, and I've been in CCL about 5 years, and I was hyper attracted to CCL by one thing, fee and dividend. Terry Quain onboarded me. I emailed her. I read about it in a book, about a religious book, believe it or not. And it said, if you want to get active in climate space, consider CCL. And I looked at the policy and I go, holy cow. Nuclear is getting killed by natural gas prices being so cheap. This will flip that in 2 years. So that turned me on. And of course, we never got fee and dividend. I've been out of the industry a long time. I have 2 careers. I had a very outstanding career. I retired around the year 2000, which is crazy, a long time ago. I had a serious health issue that, for complicated reasons, I needed to change gears, and I've always been a nuclear engineer in my heart. I found a cool career to go into in nuclear medicine, patient-facing nuclear medicine. I got board certified. It took me 2 years, and I ended up being the radiation safety officer for my company, which is right back in the licensing realm. I'm here for one reason, climate change. I have no longer affiliation with any company. Let's see a show of hands. A, B, or C. Stayed about the same, public acceptance declined or increased? How many say stayed about the same? How many say it's declined? How many say it's getting better? So we're kind of flip. Well, you're kind of all right. It's the majority of Americans say the more support, the further right leaning, the more support for nuclear. So it's backwards on climate for most things. And the optimistic statistic is that there's less split on nuclear than other issues. It's a complicated issue. I can't talk about everything. I'm familiar with almost all aspects of it, but it's one of those things that if we need to get by emotions, just deal with facts, and that's why I love CCL. And in Congress, we've heard this already, crazy support in Congress for the latest nuclear bill. I will talk about that if you have questions on it later. Right today we have 94 operating reactors. Most of those go back to the 70s, some in the 80s, and two brand new ones, state-of-the-art in Georgia. The average age is a lot older than me. Our electric growth has been flat in this country. That's all the way out to 2023. And a big chunk of it is renewables now, and renewables and nuclear are roughly even though there's a lot more renewable capacity. I'll show a little bit about that. And natural gas is king right now in this country. And coal is declining, thankfully, and largely due to people like us. So why not? Why now? Well, number one, we need more power. Demand for reliable power, like for data centers and stuff, it's exploding. And a lot of you are seeing all this stuff. A lot of the public it's just quite catching on. CCLers tend to be ahead of the curve when it comes to the climate. This is back in December. It said it's spiking. Heat pumps, data centers, factories, and EVs are putting pressure on the grid like never before. And the forecasts are shocking. This is shocking to me. This is 2022 forecast said, let me get it on. It said we're going from 720 gigawatts, and we're forecasting 835. 1 year later, we're forecasting 852 gigawatts. 1 gigawatt is the size of one medium-large nuclear plant, and there's only 94 of them in the country, and they're doing roughly 20% of our power. So this is a massive amount of electricity. So the forecast is going through the roof. I'm not going to dwell on any details. I just want to put it in proportion. Natural gas, renewables, not counting hydro, coal, hydroelectric, nuclear, that's rough height of what we've got right now on our grid. You add it all up, it's 1.2 terawatts, or 1,200 average size nuclear plants. And we only have 96 of them. Or it's 100 new coal units, or twice the battery capacity of everything that we had at the end of 2023 in this country, and that was for about 2 to 4 hours. So if you want to run everything on batteries, forget about it. So the reasons for the power demand I've already mentioned. Winter electric heating is increasing. especially in areas that are, things like on oil or are already on electric heat. It's a non-brainer to go heat pumps if you're already on electric or if you're using something else besides natural gas. Even natural gas is expensive in parts of the country. Right here, it's among the cheapest on the planet. We're near major gas hubs here. It's very, very cheap here. That's the new news. Half the world is committed to net zero, and they're serious about it. So number 2 reason, wind and solar are variable. You've heard all this. These are capacity factors. That means over the course of a year, a nuclear plant ran more than 92% of the time. The reason it's not 100% is because they have to refuel. And there's occasional outages. Back in my day, we had a lot of learning to do. There was a lot more outages, but now the preventive maintenance is outstanding, and there's excellent collusion between owners of these plants to keep up with best practices. So solar is 24.8 in the US. There's the Northern Illinois capacity factor. If I was on my game, I'd have asked you what do you think it is. It's half of that. It's a shame. It's still worth doing here, but if you put solar panels in your house and the number they use is you're going to generate on average 3 to 3.5 hours of electricity a day, based of full power capacity. Obviously, you're generating longer than that, but just not full power. So that's the same slide again. If you add up what the actual generation, all I wanted to point out is that nuclear is pulling its weight 3.5 times what renewables are right now in the country, and renewables are located in the best places so far. The wind resources are where the wind is high, the solar resources are where the solar is high. So nuclear is a unique asset. And it's also in the PJM grid, which is the one we reside in right here. It goes all the way out to Maryland. It's the largest combined network of utilities and generating facilities in America. They have a problem in August. Not enough wind. We don't have enough solar built in this part of the country to offset this discrepancy. Does that make sense to everybody we're talking about? And so that's another reason why nuclear is making a comeback. Now this is from Constellation Energy. That's the utility. That's the company that owns all the nuclear, high fraction of the nuclear plants, including all of them in Illinois. I just using their slide. This is an example of what they think all Americans need to know of why we need nuclear. And this goes over everybody's head. So as another example, they say, well, they should just read our report and they'll know why we need nuclear. Renewable generation, that's a daily plot of how much it varies in a day. PJM is the Pennsylvania, Jersey, and Maryland grid, and a lot in between. But it skips Ohio, skips Indiana, has a corner of Michigan. It's all over the place, but it's basically it's all controlled, but it's also limited by the grid itself. What can be transmitted from Chicago, for example, all the way east, and vice versa. It's most of the transmission lines. There's a lot of power exchanging hands, but it's going hundreds of miles, not thousands of miles, typically. Number 3 reason, without firm power, it's too expensive. In firm power, let me just state categorically, I'm a CCLer, okay? I am also a nuclear engineer. That's our options for firm power. Firm power means I can flip a switch and make more. Hydroelectric, gas with CCS. I hate CCS. Most of us don't like it either. It's got all kinds of issues, including siting the lines. Nobody wants them. Everybody's afraid of the leaks. It's very high pressure. Nuclear and geothermal electric. I'm a fan of all these to some degree. Nuclear and geothermal are really the ones that need to fill in this need. Hydroelectric has a lot of problems with, we're basically limited, and there's a lot of pushback now on new hydro. All right, this is a slide that I've had this in my saved file folder for 2 years now. Notice the arrow on Jesse Jenkins. Everybody recognize that name? Princeton. He's the guy who convinced us and Congress, many people in Congress, that we need transmission line reform. He's it. Dana pulls on this guy heavily. 4 outfits, Princeton, Environmental Defense Fund, Stanford University, and the Clean Air Task Force, did a modeling of California's grid and said, what are we going to do in the future? Can we go all renewables? Well, California, for those of you somewhat familiar with the state, it's already got a lot of hydroelectric. It's got some of the only geothermal power, old school geothermal. The steam comes out of the ground when you put water in it. Steam comes back out again. It's kind of easy to make. And they already have 2 large nuclear units. But even with all that availability of firm power, the modeling said, oh, no, you need way more. They want to replace the natural gas plants. They need to be on-demand sources. Well, most Californians, a lot of people don't want to hear that. We don't have on-demand sources. That's only nuclear and geothermal. Why don't we do more geothermal? We are. Nuclear power was in its infancy in 1960. I'd say geothermal is 1962. That's where we are in it. I love it. It's got a great concept. It's got to be proven. It's fracking. It's thousands and thousands of feet of fracking. We don't have time to talk about it now. They're going to take tunnels down, thousands of feet, a whole bunch of them, and go horizontally and connect it to another tunnel, thousands of feet away, and you run water through it and you get steam. How's that going to hold up over 20 years? How's it going to hold up over the course of a day? How much water is going to leak? How much seismic activity from fracking? We don't know. They're just now making it. I hope it works. And also, if you think about it, the more renewables you put online, the more transmission lines you need, the more land you need. I'll talk more about that later. But it doesn't make any sense. Yet this is what most environmentalists, and we're all environmentalists, they want wind, solar, and batteries. I'm going to be harping on that. And it's been driven me crazy from the beginning because I lived in the power industry for a long, long time, and I inherently understand that that doesn't work. But making the public understand that's almost impossible. So I've already said California is almost ideal. I'm just beating a dead horse here. Natural gas is the blue line, and nuclear is the geothermal is the little one at the very bottom, and nuclear is the greenish looking one. But it's basically gas, the brown. And solar is coming big time. This is very recent data, and it doesn't matter. When they're putting batteries on in California, they're 2 to 4 hour batteries. It's not getting, and there are periods in California when the sun doesn't shine, the wind doesn't blow. And they happen often in January. All right, this is a European study. It's really cool. It's very complicated, but I'm going to make it real simple. This was for the typical European EU country. A study was done saying, and they don't have the hydropower. They have the natural geothermal. Their basic options are, and they don't have natural gas like we do. So their options are wind, solar, nuclear, coal, gas. And they want to get rid of the coal and the gas. So you lower your carbon emissions on this line, you go in this direction, and you go more renewables to the right. And what happens is, it's hard to show this graph, but the cost just goes, see that parabola going up the ski slope there? The more renewables you go to the right, and the more you want to be carbon free to the left, prices go exponential. This is a European study that's very often cited. It doesn't apply directly to here, but remarkably, those dollar numbers are pretty much dead on in America. This is probably a 4-year-old study in Europe, and with inflation and us being cheaper, our wholesale money is $40 to $75 a megawatt hour. In your parlance, it's 4 to 7.5 cents wholesale per kilowatt hour. You're paying in Illinois roughly 15, 16 cents when you add all the other costs. And our carbon intensity, you think we're awesome? We're not awesome. 369 grams per kilowatt hour. We're way over here. We have one of the cleaner grids I think I've slide out. Yeah, yeah, we're clean, but we're not awesomely clean. You know, we think we're so great but we're great because we use natural gas and other countries use coal. So look on the right side there. Canada is killing us. Canada is highly nuclear and hydro. France is like 80% nuclear. And Germany shut their nuclear plants down, and they're burning wood. And the wood's coming from Georgia, most of it, in the form of pellets. That's supposed to be waste pellets. Well, guess what? They're not waste. Number 4 reason, seasonal storage doesn't exist. Long duration energy storage, to talk about saving something in the summer so you can have heat in the winter, those options are extraordinarily limited. Right now, hydrogen is one of the things you could do. You can store it, you don't lose anything. You store it in a battery, it'll discharge. You store it in a reservoir, it'll evaporate. And reservoirs have your long-term, your return efficiency is not that high when you pump a hydro and then pump it back again. And all your options have major barriers against it. So right now, I was thrilled when DOE made this report last year called Pathways to Commercial Liftoff of Nuclear. And they also did it for long-duration energy storage. I'm not going to dwell on this slide, but look, there's on the very top there, short duration, pump storage, mechanical storage, batteries, flywheels, cool stuff. Interdays up to 36 hours. That's what the report was based on. This report was used to determine cost estimates of what nuclear, to compete with nuclear. And they determined that right now everybody compares nuclear to the ideal situation of solar and batteries, or wind and batteries. And they say, well, they can do that for 3 cents, 4 cents a kilowatt hour. Therefore, we don't need nuclear. Wrong. For the 6 weeks in the Northwest, where they run 10 to 15% renewable capacity factors, and for the 2 weeks where California has a storm and they have no solar, and they have variable wind, to go to seasonal storage, DOE concluded the only way to do it is with chemicals. Chemicals includes gases. Right now, the way we're doing in this country is twofold, nuclear and natural gas. And so we'd have to go gas with carbon capture and sequestration, CCS. And if we're trying to do it all renewables, you've got no option. If you're trying to do it all clean, your option right now is nuclear and hydrothermal. So there is no seasonal shifting. I wish there was a way to convince the public of that. There is nothing. Yes, they're doing thermal, they're doing sand batteries in Finland. I love Finland. I'm half Finnish. They've got their act together on everything else, and they're building sand batteries, and they're heating the heck out of them in giant concrete bunkers and running pipes through it and heating their cities with it when they're done. Europe is way ahead of us when it comes to doing stuff like that. They already heat their cities, most cities and large communities with community heat. They run their coal plant or whatever they're heating, and they take the waste heat and use it for heating the house. And you can do that. It's a different subject, but they're set up for that kind of thing. We're not. Further conclusions of that study, I've already been talking about that. Enormous amount of capacity would be needed. Now we're talking about wind and solar. You need multiples of what you think you need to get through those periods, and you somehow have to store it. How often have you seen this kind of stuff? You don't need it. I'll just, Sierra Club, Greenpeace, Nuclear Energy Information Service, there's 80 companies funded with over $2 billion by fossil interests, just putting all that money into fighting nuclear. So does that make any sense? Fighting nuclear, fighting tooth and nail. US TVA decommissioned a coal plant. They decided they had to go with gas. Even EPA said, wait a minute, wind and solar. Why did they do that? They lost power. They had nothing left. 2 years ago, Christmas, nothing. We were feeding power from right here through all the way around the complicated route to Tennessee. The nuclear plant, Byron Station, was feeding Tennessee because they had problems with the coal plant, and natural gas lines were frozen, and there's just basically not enough power. It was cold. It was cold down there. A lot of heat pumps in Tennessee. All right, here's the fun stuff. Constellation Energy, they own a lot of power plants, including here. Looking at data centers. TVA approves funding to look at small modular reactors. Constellation's talking to Pennsylvania about 3 Mile Island restart. NRC holding hearings on Palisades, Michigan plant, on Lake Michigan restart. Duane Arnold in Iowa considering restart. And look, lo and behold, Microsoft and Constellation signed a power purchase agreement to restart 3 Mile Island. It's happening. This has been shut down several years. It's going to cost in the billions to refurbish the plant, but it'll run better than new. They'll put new turbines in, they'll make sure the steam generators are up to snuff, and they have to relicense it. So nuclear's advantages, these are, I'm just going to go quickly, including on the left column, death rates from accidents and air pollution. It's as low as death rate as solar, and all those deaths are from Chernobyl, all of them. There's one death possibly from Fukushima. A guy got cancer like 10 years later. They said, okay, we'll call it Fukushima. Nobody died from radiation or the nuclear plant. Thousands of them died from the stress of relocating, which was part of the industry's fault. Greenhouse gas emissions, you can't touch nuclear life cycle. You can't touch it. That's mine to shut down. How much land does it take? There's all kinds of graphics, a fraction of everything else. Wind, yes, you can farm on wind, but that's all you can do with it. You can't do anything else. You can't locate a house or a school or a factory or anything because you have to consider the wind blade falling off. Another footprint. Coal to nuclear is another fun one. It's one of my favorites. We can almost, DOE is making a target of tripling our nuclear capacity by 2050. That shows how little nuclear you need compared to wind and solar to go decarbonize the grid. That's all they're saying we need to triple it. You could do most of that at existing coal plants. We've got the land, we've got the infrastructure. You don't need the transmission lines you need for everything else. It's there already. And that's why small modular reactors have the small ones about 1/3 to 1/4 of the big size. That's the size of the coal plant was there. The coal plant may have been 200-300 megawatts, and the nuclear plants, the big nuclears are 1,200. They'd have to redo everything. They'd have to so it's a big deal. And the jobs, 650 permanent jobs, and it's a multiple of any other power source in terms of job creation and money involved. And existing nuclear sites are already licensed for multiple units. Several here were licensed for 4 units, and they only built 2. Same thing. So we already got it. And here's the fun part. This is my last fun series slides. And so at this point on, just stop me if you want to ask anything. Some of you already have. I don't have all the answers, but at least I thought about them. What was built in Georgia is considered Generation 3+. It's fully evolved existing design of water-cooled reactor. It has many passive safety features. Little or no reliance on external power and cooling. All the problems nuclear plants have had in the past is you need very complicated, multiple systems, highly defense in depth, and I know all about that stuff. I lived with them. And you rely on things. And the reason they're safe is because you've got so much defense on depth. You've got multiple power sources, multiple sources of water, multiple pumps, multiple sources of lines coming in. And that's all being semi-eliminated by having giant tanks of borated water or whatever available. And all you need is gravity, and you've got cooling water. And you design the structures and such that you got natural heat removal with the water that you have on site. So natural circulation, you can't undo the physics of it. The reactor is going to be hot, it needs to be cooled, let it be passive. Small modular reactors and Generation 4 are all considered revolutionary. They typically run at much higher temperatures, which makes for you physicists out there, or very high efficiencies. The higher the temperature, the higher the cycle efficiency of any cycle where you're generating energy. They're smaller, they can be built modular, and they're using really cool stuff. Gases, liquids, liquid metal, salt coolants, fuel dissolved in salt, all kinds of cool stuff. And something called HALEU, which sounds a lot like Halo. That's high assay, low enriched uranium. Far below weapons grade, but way higher assay than what we're allowed to do now. We run 5% enriched. These are going to be 19.95% enriched. And we've got different sizes, small, medium, and large. Microreactors. Guess who's looking to fund those? Or already has funded? Department of Defense. Why? It's obvious, right? And small towns, like in, especially in very cold climates, there are designs on paper right now that are talking about you truck it in a truck and you got 10 years of power for maybe 10,000 people. And you bring another one in 10 years later and you got 10 years of clean power. They go back to the factory, recycle the fuel, and bring it back out again. This is a picture of all the major projects that are actually happening right now in our country. There's a bigger list of projects that are just paper, but these are funded and really happening. I don't have time to talk about them all, but they kind of cluster around Idaho because there's National Idaho nuclear engineering labs are located there, and there's a population that understands nuclear. Illinois would be ideal for this too. We've got a huge population that understands all of our reactors. And they're great public acceptance here. It's a little known fact, the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act, the nuclear provisions in that, which were extensive, thankfully, were shepherded by a Republican senator in the state of Illinois. Yes?
Can you tell us what you know about TerraPower up there?
Sure, I got a slide on it, so I'll just go ahead. TerraPower is a fun one. Concepts in development, over 100 around the world. Look at them in our country. It's crazy. TerraPower, thank you. It has a construction permit. People are saying nobody's building nuclear plants. It has a construction permit, but they can only work on the non-nuclear portion until the NRC license, Nuclear Regulatory Commission, NRC, license the rest of the reactor. I downloaded their publicly available safety analysis, preliminary safety analysis report, all 1,600 pages of it, and I perused through it. I've seen those things before, and they used to be maybe 400 pages. So it's being built. It's called Natrium. Natrium is Latin for sodium. It's liquid sodium cooled reactor with metal uranium fuel, higher enriched uranium fuel. We've built these before. We've built a lot of them. It sounds impossible because how do you see what you're doing inside liquid sodium? Well, you don't. You use instruments and sensors. And the cool feature is they're taking the heat out of the reactor and putting it and interchanging it with salt, molten salts. So what happens when sodium mixes with air or water? Anybody know? Yeah, it creates hydrogen in a high temperature, exothermic, and you get explosions. So that's all been controlled. We actually had a reactor run several years in Detroit area, Fermi 1. It was liquid sodium cooled. They had problems with steam generators, where you have to get away from the sodium and create steam somehow. This is brilliant in that they're doing two sets of steam generators. They're doing an intermediate one of using liquid salts. When you put sodium and liquid salts together, one dissolves in the other. You don't get an exothermic reaction. So you only attach water on the steam generator on the next side where it goes to the power plant. So these are salt. That's cooling. There's a generator in there on the upper part. But it's a brilliant design. Bill Gates is all in to the tune of $1.2 billion, and DOE is matching it. Every time you hear it says no Generation 4 reactors being built, wrong. 2 construction permits. These are test reactors, but they're being built. And they're being built because they need it to get the data, short-term data they need to get to the next power phase, the real phase. They basically have all the same physics, all the same heat transfer going on. It's just, it allows them to tune the models and prove proof of concept. There's one going on in, where is this? This one's going on in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. And it's using something that's so awesome, I can't believe it. It's called TRISO fuel on the bottom there. It's just an example. I don't have time to go through all these examples, but it's going to be a small modular reactor. Their idea is the fuel is going to be cooled by, I think this one was what? Salt, fluoride salts. And the fuel itself is going to be tiny little seed-size particles of fuel, triple encapsulated. That's your containment. I never thought I'd see the day. It's been going on for over 10 years. They've been building these and been testing them. It started in England. And I think I got a picture of the fuel. Yes. Start on the top. See those particles where the pencil is pointing to them? That's the fuel. They're making it. We have facilities making this fuel in this country right now. They're going to make it highly enriched. It's its containment. It can be turned into regular fuel elements, or it can be turned into balls the size of ping pong balls or billiard balls, little spheres with another containment. So it's called accident-tolerant fuel. You throw anything, you throw any postulated events at it, and nothing happens. It just gets hot. It doesn't melt. There is no meltdown. It's not possible. You can take away everything. It still won't melt. Now, is it perfect? No. It's in the 99.99 phrase, but that's outstanding technology. It's awesome. So I'm excited about that. Here's the defense one I talked about. It's another one using the same fuel in a microreactor, and this one is actually being designed. It's funded, and they're working on it. It'll take 4 or less containers that'll fit on a road truck, and 1 to 5 megawatts. That's another couple thousand people, community, and it's being designed in Virginia. A Texas Abilene Christian University is building a reactor. That's awesome. A molten salt coolant with molten fuel, with fuel dissolved in the salt. You think we'd ever tried all these things before? Well, they kind of have, but this was back in the 50s and 60s, and we need to do it again. Problem with salts is, getting the vessels and stuff to work properly. The cool thing about all the reactors I'm showing you is there's no pressure involved. You don't have high pressure pipes there. You have to worry about cracking coolant. They're basically almost atmospheric. You make up for that by having high temperatures. So the technology, as a nuclear engineer, it's fascinating. This guy, Sam Altman, everybody heard of Sam Altman? The father of AI? Yeah, he's got a company called Oklo, and they're marketing that they claim they have letters of intent for 1,300 megawatts of these little 15 to 100 megawatt reactors. They want them, and one of their websites said they're going to have them in 2028. No, they're not. I know better than that. But they might have them in 2030. So they're self-funding. But it's using the same kind of fuel. Now this one's a metal-fueled. There's so many of them I get confused. But they're funded. They're a startup company, and they're not publicly funded yet, but they expect to actually do these things. And they're doing it for data centers, 100%. And the data centers are funding it. Another cool thing about nuclear power that we forget about is it generates, especially the newer designs can generate enough heat to do things like make concrete, fabricate metals, petroleum refining, chemicals manufacturing, and one of the companies, Dow Chemical, I think, is building one in Texas. When I say building, they're funding it. They're doing all the licensing work as we speak. They want to use it for chemical processing. So you can do a lot of things with a nuclear reactor. You can make hydrogen too. But as any of you who are nerds in here know that once you have electricity, the most efficient way of reusing that electricity is to put it in a battery. Once you put it in make hydrogen out of it and start using it again, you're down to 40% efficiency if everything works perfectly. That's just showing what DOE is funding. Okay, now I've got all kinds of more stuff, depending on what you want to talk about. Should we can pass microphones around, or we shout it out? Thank you. I've got that many more slides for your questions.
Where do we put the spent fuel?
Let's talk about nuclear waste. Is it A, B, C, or D? Is it mostly liquid? Show of hands. You know, you guys are smart. Is it liquid and gas? Is it solid? Okay, you all know. Is it hazardous as stored today? No, it's not. It's not. The way it's stored today, the only way you could breach the containment of the dry cask storages that this young lady is standing next to would be probably with something akin to a nuclear blast. There's several feet of concrete, multiple layers of steel, cylindrical, and the fuel has already been decayed down to a level where unless you somehow blow it up and throw it in the air, it's not going anywhere. And it's in containers that are designed to be repurposed and re-shipped to final disposal. Now, a lot of people don't like nuclear waste. I don't blame you, but I've got more slides on it. Yeah.
How long does that last?
It's for you mathematicians out there. It's typically modeled on 6 exponentials. The last one's measured in hundreds of years. So it's called the actinides. They last a long, long time. There's tricky ways of avoiding those with some of the reactors I highlighted. And if you recycle fuel, you get rid of those. But yeah, it lasts a long time. It's hazardous to the point of being inside your body up to a couple hundred years. After that, it's hazardous only if you literally put it in your food chain, or you bathe in it. Yeah, another question.
Yeah. What about security issues,
Yeah.
terrorists, et cetera, with all these
Right.
smaller facilities out there? Is that an issue?
That has not come up. That has not been publicly listed as one of the major issues. There's been misinformation campaigns on how much waste small reactor. The very first reactor that got licensed by the NRC, nobody's buying it. It's basically an ultra safe design, but it's a conventional design, and people are interested in the more exotic stuff because it's going to be way cheaper to run eventually. And so they had purchase agreements on it, and some of the analysis showed that there was more waste from it than the other reactors, than the current reactors. All the exotic ones I've showed you will have less waste. But security is, that's a function of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and right now, it's really not an issue. That's when you see the 650 people working at a site for a single unit, a lot of that is security. And there's security plans, there's emergency plans, there's hotlines to National Guard, the governor, and then all that's rehearsed every year. All the things that can go wrong. Oh yeah, you're talking. Yeah. That's a great question. Yeah, I didn't make slides on that one because I just read the industry's official position on that is that the security of the what you're really referring to, the higher enriched fuel, sounds like it's closer to a bomb, and it is, but it's not a bomb, and it's a long ways from it. And there is extraordinary security measures now on moving that uranium. The good news, the funny thing is, once it's run a couple days in a reactor, it's theft-proof. There's only a few facilities in the world that could take spent fuel rods and handle them without dying. You need several feet of glass. You need remote operating tools, and all that is highly controlled. And the movement of that is highly controlled, and it's escorted, it's planned in advance, and it's happening. And I got more interesting stuff here. Another question? Yes.
Where is the United States sourcing most of its uranium, and is there waste generated in the upstream enrichment process?
In the enrichment process?
2 questions.
Yeah.
Where is the U.S. getting most of its uranium, and is there waste generated during the enrichment process?
The question is, where is the waste being stored that's generated in the uranium processing phase? It's basically going in. It's going into separate locations. It was done poorly in the 50s, There are legacy cleanup sites. One of them is in Kentucky, and money is allocated, and they are cleaning it up. But basically, it can go back in the environment similar to where it came from. It's less radioactive than when they started because they pulled the good stuff out, the 235 versus the 238. It's a great question, and it's being handled properly today. You don't see people intervening on those things. It's not the big a deal. If you look at nuclear waste generation at all phases compared to other forms of electricity, it's massively small. It's 10 to the 6th more energy intensive than burning chemicals. Let me show you more on this. All the U.S. commercial nuclear waste ever generated would fit on a football field. If you put it, now it wouldn't happen that way. It's stored, it's spaced right now for cooling reasons. It's left in its natural, in the fuel assembly state. And it amounts to about 7 quarters per person. Now this is over 40 years, or 50 years of generation. So coal plants produce 32 times more waste per day than reactors produce in their lifetime. And much of that's radioactive. And there's been $48 billion paid already from ratepayers into the Nuclear Waste Fund at a fraction of a penny at 0.1 cents per kilowatt hour. That's more than enough money to do it if we would come together and figure out where to put it. In other words, it's the only form of energy generation we have today where we paid for the disposal as we made it, as we used it. It's on your bill right now. You don't see it, but it's on your bills now. And that's a U.S. law. That's not a state law. And there's some new concepts out there. Deep borehole. There's a company called Deep Isolation. It's really cool. They're basically fuel assembly-sized holes. Fuel assemblies vary between like 6 by 6 inches and a little bit bigger, depending on the type of reactor. They make their own can, stick it in there, and push it way, way down, and forget about it. Make sure it's way below the hydrology issues. And the amount of fracking to do this is I would assume, is very small, but because you can go real deep and you start stacking them. And Finland has one licensed, and they're building it in a city called Onkalo. And they're doing it. Now, here's the part that nobody seems to know or recognize. Let me go ahead one more slide. This is the waste isolation pilot plant. It's located in New Mexico. 16 square miles were set aside in 1992. Guess what's going there? Where did we get all our nuclear weapons from? Yeah. All kinds of cool places. Los Alamos, Richland, Washington, Tennessee. Tons and tons of spent fuel, virtually identical to what we're generating now. The form is different, but chemically and nuclear radioactivity-wise, what's in there is identical to what the nuclear power plants have. We're storing it. We're storing it safely for years. We have one of the best places in the planet to store it in these deep salt mines. That's how it works. A couple thousand feet down, there's ventilation systems. You stack it up inside there like this, and these are geologically hyperstable. No seismic activity, no volcanic activity, no water down there. They're tens of millions of years old. And what happens is that the salt will slowly heal itself. It will creep down because you got 2,000 feet of weight on top of it, and it'll crush it. And a rather trivial analysis of the spent fuel will show it's not going to go critical again. And nobody's ever going to see it again. We're doing it. Nobody knows we're doing it. They all think it's the biggest problem on the planet. Well, we've got thousands of nuclear weapons we've built. It took a lot of reactors to make that. A lot. That's the site. And look at all the areas we have such areas, such mines. Okay, more questions? Yes?
We process 40,000 Soviet nuclear weapons,
Yeah.
our fuel.
Yeah.
Did we do that with our own nuclear weapons, or what happened to those?
All we've taken from Soviet. I'm not a fuels enrichment and procurement guy. I know people who are. My understanding is we're buying enriched uranium. Enriched uranium that was used in warheads that are taken apart. Enriched uranium means it's 90+% uranium-235. Natural uranium is 0.7%. It's very expensive to go from 0.7 to 90, 95 enrichment. It's called gaseous diffusion plants and circular centrifuge plants. That's what Iran is building now. They're building centrifuges. And you're basically, you're looking for the difference between something that weighs 235 versus that weighs 238. It isn't much difference. But yeah, we're buying raw U-235 that they've already processed, and we're down blending it to go in our reactors. Any more questions? Yes?
What's your, what do you think of, what's his name, Robert Oppenheimer?
Oh, the Oppenheimer, the movie?
Guy.
Well, the guy? I don't know. I'm not that old. I don't know. I just remember how he was badly treated by the equivalent of what's going on in some politics today. They call him a communist. And I think the idea, I think it's unfortunate that mankind's first use of your highly enriched uranium was for a bomb. It's just unfortunate. And I think that set us on the course where we are today. And I'm grateful that there's been enough intelligence to turn that around. Put the movie on. We got time. Any of you have teenage daughters? Any of you heard of the thing, or granddaughters? You've heard about, how cool it is to be demure? All right.
See how I produce minimal waste that can be safely stored and potentially recycled for future use? Very responsible, very demure. See how I provide reliable power, 24/7, rain or shine, without producing carbon emissions? Very stable, very demure. See how I require the least amount of land of any energy source? Very cutesy, very demure. See how I employ thousands of workers and offer the highest median wage of any energy sector job? Very respectful, very demure.
That was there's a group just like CCL called Generation Atomic. I need to put a shout out to Jim Hopf, HOPF. He leads our nuclear action team. He's a member of Generation Atomic. There are people just like you and me that are stumping for nuclear, and I'm beyond thrilled that CCL has formally embraced nuclear 2 years ago. I got to see one representative with Vanessa and tell him that how thrilled he was thrilled to hear that CCL was officially pro-nuclear because we're science-based, we're not fiction-based. So thank you for being here. Yeah.